Hi, assalamu alaikum everyone. Leah here, back for my monthly live video for April. It is a lovely sunny day here in Michigan, alhamdulillah. I'm celebrating the turn of weather finally by wearing white, which I feel is a summery color, so inshallah it stays warm, but Michigan you can never predict. It's really it's such a cornerstone of Michigan culture to always talk about the weather. You know, whenever we meet someone from somewhere else, like, oh, how's the weather over there? Which actually ends up being a nice segue into the excuse me, to the topic for today, which is about Islam and culture, in particular, excuse me, how it affects converts. So, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. Hang on, let me just take a look at the time so I make sure I don't go over. Okay. Excuse me. So, Islam and culture. This is a big one. This is a topic I love talking about. I've been looking forward to this chat for a while. Assalamu alaikum everyone who's joining. Please feel free to drop comments and questions in the comment section, obviously. And just before I get started, if anyone has any comments on my appearance or what I'm wearing or my jewelry, there should be a little X button for you somewhere to just click away from the video. So that is what you're invited to do. All right. So Islam and culture and how it affects, in particular, converts. And again, I like to use the word convert. Some people like to use the word revert. I'll probably be using convert for the most part. So, oftentimes, we converts are told that Western culture is un-Islamic. It's incompatible with Islam. We can't participate in our culture because it goes against Islam. Some people, this is a really common thing that I heard a lot, is in particular in my early years of being a Muslim. I've been Muslim for 10 years now, alhamdulillah. People would say there's no culture in Islam. There's no culture, there's only Islam. There's only Allah. Islam is our culture, which is a lovely sentiment. It's such a nice sounding little sound bite, so to speak. But is that a reality? Is it even a possible reality? No. The people who say that, these are Pakistanis, these are, Emiratis, these are Egyptians, these are Malaysians, these people telling us that there's no culture in Islam. People who are often dressed in their traditional cultural clothing, people who serve traditional cultural foods. How can you say there's no culture in Islam? I think the mistake people make is they don't have a true understanding of what culture is, which is pretty basic, but I mean, how often do we really think critically about the meanings of the words that we say? I mean, you just talk, you don't think about every single word that comes out of your mouth. So what is culture? I think what a lot of people are getting confused is popular culture. And I'm not even going to go so far as to say that all popular culture is un-Islamic, but we'll just paint with a broad brush today. So anyone who lives, let's see, like in the United States, if you have never done much extensive traveling, we aren't necessarily aware of how pervasive our popular culture or pop culture is. When I was in high school, I spent a year living in France as an exchange student, and the French kids, they all listened to American music. They all watched American TV. They all watched American movies. Like we really underestimate how far-reaching our popular culture is. So from the perspective of those of us who are quote unquote Westerners, because I saw that we have a convert from Australia watching right now, Salam. And on a map, you know, Australia is in the east, but that's also considered Western culture. So like North American, European, like just to put it pretty bluntly, like white people culture is what's considered Western. So we, in particular, we Americans really should have a little bit of empathy and understanding, and like that's where people are coming from. If this is the only view that you ever get of American culture is through popular culture, then it's not difficult to understand, you know, this perception. However, it is really frustrating when people who may have been born, for example, in Pakistan, or whose parents are from Pakistan or whatever, but they live here in the US or Canada or wherever we are, and they're the ones telling us American culture is incompatible. Well, you live here, like, you know that pop culture isn't the only thing that it is. That culture is. So I've gotten on a little bit of a sidetrack. My point is, our popular culture from America is so pervasive. So that's often the only, like, you don't get to understand American cultural nuances when you're watching big budget movies. So I encourage other converts to please have a little bit of understanding and compassion. Like, that's where it's coming from a lot of the time. And I think most people, if they're genuinely ignorant and not just being stubborn, are open to learning the truth. And that's fine. Alhamdulillah, like, whatever. But it is just naive to say that there is no culture in Islam. Like, we all are participating in our culture every day. It's like you can't just not have a culture. That's not something that can happen. It's a part of human existence. So my point here is, you know, pop culture is a big thing, but excuse me. I drank my coffee too fast, so excuse me. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Excuse me. But it's not the only thing that comprises culture. So if you're one of the people that says there's no culture, there's only Islam, remember that. Like, when you make your traditional cultural food, or you wear your cultural outfits, or you know, sing songs in your native language, or whatever it may be, that's culture as well. So don't pretend like the only, and even ways that people participate in Islam and in Islamic community are culturally influenced. I'm not going to go too deep into that. I encourage you to examine what you do with a critical eye and keep an open mind, and you'll realize that you participate in your culture if you're one of those. Okay. So, and I also think it's important for people to remember, let me check the time again, because I will talk about this for hours if I'm given the opportunity. So going back to sort of the statement that some people say that Western culture is incompatible with Islam, or Western culture goes against Islam. Obviously, those are based on misconceptions. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about how, you know, these misconceptions go both ways. For those of you who are not from a Western culture, and I keep on going to Pakistan, but that's just, I'm not picking on you guys, honestly. I have a lot of Pakistani friends, so this is just something I'm familiar with. I'll pick on someone else another day. But if you ask your average American, like, so tell me a little bit about Pakistani culture, they're going to say, oh yeah, you know, like, that's such a dangerous place for women. You know, it, like, all the women are oppressed and miserable all the time, and there's terrorists everywhere, and it's just such a dangerous place to be. And while there may be some elements of some of those things, within some parts of the culture, that is not, I would say that most Pakistanis would not describe their culture that way. Culture is so much more than like these some negative things that like these certain negative things that have, you know, grains of truth here and there throughout different areas, but that doesn't mean it describes the entire culture. And so if you're the one saying, you know, Western culture goes against Islam, remember you're basing that on misperceptions, and those same misperceptions are things that Westerners have about your culture. Sort of try and have that like a compassionate or empathetic mindset, you know, just because you see people just like having sex all over the place on in American TV shows doesn't mean that that is that is something that's pervasive in American culture. You know, it may be true that generally speaking in America we're more sexually open, but that doesn't mean like that is the descriptor of American culture, you know. Okay, so anyway, and then we're also talking about Islamic practices. This goes both ways. And again, sorry, Pakistan, I'm gonna pick on you. I'm so engrossed in what I'm saying. I'm completely missing all the comments. I'll try and reserve some time at the end to look through the comments, but I'm just on a roll here. So, un-Islamic cultural practices also happen in Muslim majority societies, in so-called Islamic cultures. I know the joint family system is a big thing in Pakistani culture. That's un-Islamic. A woman has a right to her own house. A woman has a right to her own space. And some of you will say, oh, well, in a lot of these houses, you know, you have your own living space, you have your own kitchen, fine. But how many of these women living in joint family systems are expected to take care of the food for the whole family, expected to take care of her in-laws? Again, not Islamic. A woman isn't even required to make food for her own family. That is not an Islamic requirement. So if you're saying like, you know, she has to, not only does she have to, you know, make food and clean up after her own little nuclear family, she has to do it to the in-laws too. That is un-Islamic. A woman in Islam, a married woman, has zero obligation to her in-laws. She does not have to obey them. She does not have to serve them. She does not have to like them. She does not have to talk to them. Is it better to be kind and respectful to your husband's parents? Of course. But does she have to? No. So my point isn't to pick on Pakistani culture. Let me pick on Western culture now. And so, you know, obviously there are some Western un-Islamic practices too, like having sex outside of marriage. Again, it's pretty common here. Obviously, that's un-Islamic. I mean, if you're going to pretend that that doesn't happen in Muslim countries, it does. It does. I'm just saying. Anyway, that's something that's common and open and accepted in many Western societies, is having sex outside of marriage. So those are both, like, you can't see these big cultural things that are portrayed widely and say, oh, see, this is evidence your culture goes against Islam. Because, excuse me, there are lots of cultural practices in Muslim majority countries that are un-Islamic as well. It's both ways. So unless you're going to write off your own culture, you can't write off anyone else's. And again, the correct thing wouldn't be to say like I'm not telling, oh Lord, oh, sorry. I'm not telling, you know, Pakistanis to say, oh, Pakistani culture is terrible because of, you know, how un-Islamic the joint family system is. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, you know, there are some wonderful, amazing parts of any culture that exists. Take the good and leave the bad. When we converts are told our culture is un-Islamic, that's not true. When we become Muslim, what we have to do is we have to leave parts that are un-Islamic behind. That doesn't mean that we abandon our culture. I'm still American. You know, like, there are lots of things about me that are American. My family has been in this country since before the 1700s. Like, you know, as as far back as immigrants have been in this country, you know, so like that doesn't go away just because I become Muslim. Okay. So I think I've made my point. Assalam to everyone who's joining. Lots of comments that I'm sure are really wonderful are going now. This is a popular topic and I love talking about it, and I'm sorry I've just totally blown by them. I'm trying to keep track on the time, or keep an eye on the time. There are a couple questions I got, were given to me in an email to talk about. Let's see, 3 of them were basically the same question. The first, or not, 2 of them were, one was, okay, see here, I'm just like all over the place. One was saying, I want to convert to Islam. Can I be Canadian and Muslim at the same time? Yes, 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 you can. Absolutely. I became Muslim when I was living in Canada. You can totally be Muslim and Canadian at the same time. Absolutely. We'll be happy to welcome you to Islam, inshallah. Yes. Another person, I said something along the lines of, I'm Mexican and Muslim, but I miss being Mexican and participating in Mexican culture. Can I participate in Mexican culture? Of course, the parts that don't go against Islam, and still be Muslim. Yes, yes, you can. Absolutely. Enjoy Mexican culture. Enjoy your cultural practices, your cultural food, your cultural clothes, your cultural whatever. Absolutely, you can participate in Mexican culture and still be Muslim. Absolutely. No, I'll go to the one that was slightly different first, because the other one that was similar, I'm going to go off on a little bit. Another person said, before I was Muslim, I used to participate in community events and, you know, go to social events. Am I allowed to do this? Can I socialize with non-Muslims? Can I participate and volunteer even if these events are organized by a church? Yes, yes, you can. Absolutely, you can. Yes. You can't worship Jesus. Don't do that, you know? And if you're Muslim, you're not going to be doing that just because something is organized by a church. Lots of mosques in Western countries organize community events or organize volunteering events. And we don't only want Muslims there, like they're community events. Absolutely you can. Yes. The last question, which was similar to the first 2, was, I'm American. Can I be American and Muslim at the same time? This one added, my Arab friend says there is no nationalism in Islam. Can I still be American? Yes, you can be American and Muslim at the same time. Look at me, that's what I'm doing. I wanted to address this one a little bit longer because I want to talk about, we already talked about the meaning of the word culture. Now let's talk about the meaning of the word nationalism. Nationalism is thinking that your country or your nation is better than everyone else's. So in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there weren't nations, there weren't nation states as there are today. You know, the Prophet ﷺ lived in what is now modern day called Saudi Arabia, but there was no Saudi Arabia back then. There was no Oman, there's no Yemen, these places existed, but there were not borders with nation states. So yeah, like one could argue there's no nationalism in Islam because there were no nations at the time of the Prophet, but there's also no computers and stuff. So they did have tribes at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and people did identify with their tribes. So that is the closest thing that I can find. Yes, you can absolutely identify as American and Muslim. Absolutely. 100%. It is true. There is no nationalism in Islam. That does not mean that you can't identify a nation that you're from. What it means is you can't think you're better than anyone else because of where you're from. And it's... I lived in Oman for 4 years. Okay, it's a lovely, lovely place. Lovely people. Wonderful country. They have a national day in Oman. In neighboring UAE, there's a national day. National Day of Bahrain, National Day of Saudi Arabia. These countries all have their own national days where they celebrate their country. That is not un-Islamic. Here in the U.S., 4th of July, Independence Day. 1st of July in Canada and a lot of other Commonwealth countries, Independence Day. Bastille Day in France. These things are not un-Islamic. It's un-Islamic to say, oh, I'm better than you because I'm American. That's un-Islamic. That is something that is pervasive across my country. Is going through some really ugly nationalism right now that exists in Muslim countries too. Don't fool yourself into thinking that Muslims don't feel nationalism too. They shouldn't. We shouldn't. Nationalism has no place in Islam because you're born within the confines of an invisible border that is man-made and that's called, Egypt. Congratulations for being born there. It doesn't make you better than anyone. Same thing goes for every country. I'm not picking on you Egyptians. I just didn't want to say Pakistan because I picked on them enough already. It doesn't make you better than anyone. You're not better than Pakistanis. You're not better than Iraqis. You're not better than, Americans or Mexicans or Australians or Chinese or whatever. This is really where we should be focusing. We shouldn't be saying there is no culture. We should be saying there's no nationalism. Because this feeling of I'm better because I'm from, wherever is so pervasive and so ugly. And that is where a lot of really bad problems lie. But again, it doesn't mean that you can't be American and Muslim at the same time. That's not nationalism. You can even say, I love America, or I love Egypt, or I love Germany, or I love, Nigeria, or I love, wherever you may be from. You're allowed to love where you're from, and you're allowed to be proud of where you're from, but you're not allowed to think that you're better than other people because of where you're from. Let's see, let me check the time again. I still have a little bit of time. So I would just want to make a couple quick notes before I go quiet for a minute and scroll up through these comments. There are, every year when it's around certain holidays, lots of non-American, and I'm using America as an example because I'm from here and I know what I'm talking about when I talk about American culture. But this applies to other Western countries as well. Other non-American Muslims will be like, oh, Thanksgiving, that's un-Islamic. That's from pagan practices. First of all, no, it's not. Mother's Day. Every day is Mother's Day. All these different things. First of all, Mother's Day exists in most Muslim countries. Okay, this is going right along with National Day. My point here isn't to pick out different holidays and say those are okay. If you believe that the only 2 days that you're allowed to celebrate are the 2 Eids, then that's fine. I don't think that that's what that means. I think that means those are the 2 Islamic holidays, not that those are the 2 holidays anyone is ever allowed to celebrate, but whatever, I won't debate that. My point is, don't comment on other cultures' holidays unless you actually understand them. We have Independence Day, like I just mentioned, on July 4th, here in the U.S. That's not Islamic as long as we're not being jerks about America being better than everyone else. Because, that's, again, nationalism. Thanksgiving is a big one because people think it's a religious holiday. It's absolutely not. I would only caution American Muslims to be aware of not pushing the whole pilgrim and native narrative in Thanksgiving, because that's untrue and harmful to the indigenous peoples who we stole land from historically, so don't do that. But is there anything wrong with getting together and eating food with your family? No. That's fine. And again, I'm not just going to go through and pick, but like my point is, don't comment on another culture's holidays or another country's holidays unless you actually really understand what they are. So, and then also, like, remember, if you're from a Muslim country, like, you guys have other holidays too. Like, you guys have your Independence Days, your National Days, your Mother's Days. Father's Day is less common, I found, but when we lived in Oman, I always made my husband celebrate Omani Mother's Day and American Mother's Day. But they don't have Omani Father's Day, so he only got one Father's Day, and I got Mother's Day twice. So, let's see. I am kind of going quiet for a second, just scrolling through the... Sometimes there are some things that are more Islamic in the West than Muslim countries, such as welfare for the poor, etc. That's from Salahuddin Francis. Excellent comment. That is a topic I totally neglected to say. And I want to make clear, I'm not trying to say like, oh, Western countries are better Islamically. That's not necessarily true. There are some things that are way more un-Islamic in Western countries, but like this... it seemed like this brother pointed out, there are some things in Western countries that are more Islamic. There's no social safety net in a lot of Muslim majority countries. Like, if you're poor, you're screwed. And I mean, that exists to an extent in my country, in the US too. But in a lot of European countries and in Canada, there's a social safety net that is theoretically designed to make sure that no one goes without food. I can't quote it exactly, but I believe there's one hadith from the Prophet ﷺ where he says, like, I'm not even paraphrasing, like, I'm just summarizing the idea of it. There's no such thing as stealing food, because if someone steals food, then we as a community are sinning against that person because he can't eat. Like, we as Muslims are supposed to make sure everyone can eat. Everyone has their basic needs provided for. This is an Islamic idea. There should not exist people that are so poor they have nowhere to live and nothing to eat. And again, like, I'm not saying that Western countries have that down, because in my country, in the US, we certainly don't. And I don't think there's any country that has that down, but there are a lot of European countries in particular that have some pretty decent social safety nets. And yeah, that is an Islamic idea. Absolutely. Really great comment. Hold your breath and stop talking for a moment. Thank you. Okay. I have experienced culture in Islam trying to find a husband, even though the men talked to me for many months, leading me to believe there's something. Even in the end, they say, my family won't accept us because you're not from our culture. That's from Sister Kimberly Young. I'm really sorry that you went through that. That's really unacceptable. I will say that, like, if you want to look for a silver lining, that, you don't want to be involved with a guy like that anyway. The only other caution, you also want to look out for guys who are in particular looking for Western women. Like, that's the only other caution I would give. But I'm like, see, this is unacceptable. This is nationalism, like, that's nationalism, or that's cultural. Like, that's thinking that you're better or better than someone else because of your culture, because of their culture. That idea is not supposed to exist in Islam, but as you can see, it does. See. One person, Saudi, says, follow a culture is no problem unless it goes against Islam. And that's a good point, but I do just want to clarify that there is no culture that is 100% Islamic. There is no culture that goes 100% against Islam, not one that I've seen. So comments like that, I think, are kind of like a broad brush sort of thing. You want to say following any culture is no problem, just leave the parts that go against Islam. But I think that's probably what you meant, Saudi. So let's see. Okay, and I think I got back to the beginning. If I missed a comment, then I'm really sorry. I'll loop back around for the person who just now joined. I'm wrapping it up right now, but the topic was culture in Islam, and please feel free to go back and listen to it. I talked a lot. This is one of the topics that I really enjoy talking about. It's something that I think is really important. Not only for converts, but also for people who have been Muslim their whole life. Like, embrace the beautiful cultural practices you have, and that's a part of you. That's a part of your identity. Don't say that there's no culture, there's only Islam. I think that one of the most amazing things about the Muslim community, like as a worldwide community, is that we come from such a variety of different cultures. It's really incredible. All continents. I actually wanted to comment. Actually, I wanted to comment there. Like in South America, there are more, and like Islam is a growing thing there, and it's something that I read about a few months ago. It's really interesting. Like all over the world, they're like Muslims. We all have these different cultural backgrounds that we all bring, and yet we're all Muslim. Like that's something that unites us, and that's something that I think is really unique for a community that's almost 2 billion people. Excuse me again. So rather than saying like there's no culture, there's only Islam, like alhamdulillah for all these amazing different cultures, and may we all bring the best of our cultures to our Islam. Leave the bad parts, but embrace the parts that make us such an incredibly diverse yet unified community. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and leave this because I'm a little bit over 30 minutes. I hope everyone enjoyed this. I sure enjoyed talking so much my throat is dry. So thanks everyone, and I hope everyone has a great weekend, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.